could we please, those zooming in online, could you please have your video streaming as well so that we actually know that you're there in attendance? Because if your video stops, it looks like you disappear from the conversation, and that can be difficult if we don't understand that you're part of the conversation before we vote on anything. So please just make sure that your videos are recording. Your videos are up and running. Thank you. Right. Call for apologies. I haven't received any from any members of the committee, so ask around the table, has anyone had any apologies? No. Okay, we'll take them as none. Public forum, item 3. I haven't been notified of any public forum. Conflict of interest declarations. Does anyone have any conflict of interest for any item we have on the agenda today? Looking at Zoom. No. If there's anything that comes up that you feel you do have a conflict of interest with, please raise it at that time. Confirmation of order of business, we'll take it as listed in the agenda there, and we will move on to confirmation of minutes of the previous finance meeting, which starts on page 6 of the electronic order paper. And I'll go through those page by page, and if there's any amendments required, please call out or hold your hand up at the time. Right, so page 6, page 7, 8, 9, and 10. If there are no amendments required, could I have someone move that they're a true and correct record? Councillor Duncan, do you have an amendment or are you moving? Moving, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carter. All those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. Item 7 on the agenda, we have the follow-up action items from the previous meeting, and the report is attached. And who is taking us through this report?
As per the council, it's really just if there's any items that you want raised or want further information on, there's people in the room that should be able to answer that.
Yeah. So page 12 of the order paper has the list of current follow-up actions, and they are all in progress at the moment. Does any member have any questions?
Just
Councillor Wilson.
Quick one from me, Chair. So item 4 there, which is a query that I made with regards to the $150,000 carryover. Status is still in progress. I thought it was fairly easy to figure that one out as to why it's
We'll ask
there.
for an explanation on that one, or an update, I should say.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we are doing work at the moment on the OPEX and CAPEX for the next annual plan, and in there we figured out that what this was work that was completed, but because of the way we approve the assets to be carried over to us, so all those approvals had to be done, it was only invoiced in this financial year, so they just carried over the bit that was not spent really in the previous financial year. So when you look in that budget now, it is just about completely spent. I think there's 127,000 that's came off the 150. So it was just a carry over to pay the contractor for work completed after inspections.
Okay, so subsequent to that, just to seek some clarification, so that final invoicing in bits and pieces, and I accept that it's come through, is all to that one specific job. So it's within its original allocated budget and its original allocated amount of money for that job in Hereford Heights. That's correct. Section.
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you.
So does that answer your question? Yes. And then records that no further action is required then? Yep.
Thank you for that.
Right. Any questions to those on Zoom? Any members on Zoom to that report? Councillor Dalgety.
Hi, I'm just, Mr. James, I'm just interested around the council forestry holdings, and I just see that request was, in like nearly a year ago, and I'm just wondering if you can update us on that.
Yeah, sure. It just gets down to priorities and capacity, councillor. We've had so much on the agenda for the last 12 months, that's really not had as much attention as maybe we'd like, but in the overall scheme of things, that just wasn't seen as big a priority as some of the other jobs we've been putting our resources to. If you'd like that escalated, I can, but that means something else would have to drop off, and there's some pretty high priority tasks we're looking at the moment.
I'll leave you to do that prioritisation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it just does sit there, but
Yeah, I was the same as the one beneath it. It's just, yeah, it would be nice to know that information, but there's other stuff we're looking at which is a real need to address as opposed to general information type stuff.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, obviously you do have to prioritise what's in front of you, but if there's a requirement for that information to be provided, could we have some sort of perhaps time frame put around it, maybe within 6 months?
I can give you a time frame, but that would be well. Can I fit that question around and say, is this just for general information, or what would be behind that request? I can't remember who made the request. One of the councillors would have done.
Yeah, I'm not sure who actually. Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
look,
Councillor.
our forestry holdings are that minute. If we looked on the balance sheet, we'd barely find them. I think if Councillor Dalgetty has a look in the previous long-term plan or the district plan, she'll probably find some reference to it. We've got a couple of hectares at Toi Toi Road. We've harvested the Martin dams, and we no longer have trees on the block at Hiitahi, just south of Wairuru, that was vested in us eons ago. And I think that's about the sum total.
Yeah. Yeah,
There
and
might
that's
be another
possibly
block somewhere, but
that's possibly what the question was about.
Yeah.
Is there a requirement to do an annual report on forestry, on council's forestry holdings? And maybe that's the only report that has to be supplied. Your worship, you've got
Yes, there is a requirement. Certainly every long-term plan, and I suspect every annual plan in the past, there has been a letter. John Turkington Company has provided a report on those holdings.
Okay, so perhaps if that hasn't been requested or if that hasn't been done, maybe that's something that's required. I understood it was an annual requirement for a report on our forestry blocks. So if that's been supplied, that could be put to this committee. That report could be put to this committee to answer that question. Councillor Carter.
I believe the request at the time was that council forestry holdings, whatever. The question was, what holdings do we have? To identify what we've got.
And that report would potentially cover that off. Worship.
I mean, Angus is absolutely right. Years and years ago, they were substantial, and we wrote off a huge amount of money every single year. The states of our forestry were incredibly poor. However, we've since exited a number of those arrangements. So we don't have nullable trees anymore around B and C dams. We've the old A dams, which had forestry on them, we've sold those. Bulls is probably the only one, substantial one we had left. We also had a block at the dairy farm at Rata. They were tiny pieces of land. The administration costs and annual report costs were through the roof. It was ludicrous. Anyway,
Okay.
but I'm not aware which councillor asked for that report. I can't remember, but that's their right, you know.
Well, if it's a requirement to have a report on our forestry holdings, then if it hasn't been undertaken, could that be perhaps an undertaking coming from the questioning of this update, that gets undertaken and then provided to this committee? Yeah, thank you. Okay, Any further questions? Online? No. Okay. Could I have someone move that report be received? Councillor Gordon, seconded by Councillor Carter. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Item 8 on the agenda is the guidelines on postponed or cancelled events and initiatives.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Bushman. I did insert your chair's report.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you have too. Yeah, I've jumped ahead on my agenda.
No sleep.
I will go to my chair's report before we move on to item 8, and that's tabled. You should have all received that by email. Those online should have received that by email. You've all got that there. It's fairly brief. There's just a couple of points there. One was around the significant rain event that we had prior to Christmas, and obviously there are a number of properties that have been affected, and I understand some of our roading assets will have been impacted by that. Financially, that's going to have an impact to us as a council, and I guess we would in turn get a report through assets and infrastructure about the impact of that rain event and the costs imposed to us as a district. I guess that's probably a question, Arno, that you might be able to answer now, to say that yes, there will be some reporting back through assets and infrastructure. Is that right?
Absolutely. So some background information for councillors is there was a site visit with Waka Kotahi on about the 16th or the 17th of January this year to take them through the damage that was caused. And then they'll come back to us with an approved works program and with a fire rate. So once we've done that, I can come back to you with what our portion would be and how that will be funded and how it will affect us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I certainly haven't driven around the roads of the district, but I know that a couple of roads were significantly affected by it. So, yeah, it will have undoubtedly an impact to us.
And are we satisfied with assets and infrastructure as the format for that, or the place?
Yes, for sure. That's yeah.
If I may add to that,
Yes.
it's also the impact that repairing those roads will have on our maintenance program.
Yeah, true. So that's three things you're right.
So yeah, certainly through assets and infrastructure is the correct committee to report that back through. Questions of my report, Your Worship?
Just relating to that, was any of the damage an insurable claim?
It's interesting, roading is not insured because of the fire rate. Normally under really large natural hazards, we get a much higher fire rate. That's why we don't insure it. I think some bridges are insured, but generally, so because it's not insured, we can't claim.
We do carry an insurance on bridges, don't we?
I think we might carry some insurance on some of the large ones, so there might be a list of 4 or 5 of them that's really large, but the rest again will be covered under that fire rate under a natural disaster. Generally, we would get a 98 or 100% fire rate.
And that will come through in the report that's provided through ANI anyway. Yeah, thank you. Any questions on Zoom of my report? Councillor Duncan. You're on mute. Sorry, Councillor Duncan.
Sorry about that. I just want to say that some of the questions coming from the far end of the table, for instance, a couple that the Mayor just put were quite indistinct.
Thank you. I'll speak up. Is that better?
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, I'm happy to move my chair's report be tabled. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Your Worship. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 8, reports for decision, and we have there the guidelines on postponed or cancelled events and initiatives. It's page 13 of the order paper. And taking us through this will be Ash. Welcome.
Thank you. So I just put this together. The only thing to really comment on is I put 6 months in there as the timeline distinguishing postpone and cancel just as a suggestion. And I did that because that's roughly how long each funding round is. And also if it was 12 months, I thought there might be some confusion with annual events just go into the next year, but obviously that's up to you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for putting this together. It does clearly state some of the concerns that some of the committee members had around potential refunding of funds for some of these events, and especially in this climate with COVID at the moment. So we've all had a chance to read through this report. I'll take questions on the report now, and we'll revert to Ash to provide some information if there's anything else required. Questions from around the table or on Zoom?
Happy to move receipt.
You're able to move the receipt. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Seconded by Councillor Carter. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So basically it spells out, the report spells out, is there anyone online? Is there someone asking a question? No.
Just give you a look at.
Okay. So basically that report spells out the changes which will cover off what is postponed versus what is cancelled. And it still allows the potential to fund an event, to fund some costs to an event that has been cancelled, but where some of those costs have actually already been outlaid. So it may be some advertising and things like that, that the event can't obviously go and claim back. We've obviously given support to it, and they've gone out and spent some money on advertising. And I think it's fair that we don't just ask for the full funds back when they've actually instigated an event to the best of their abilities, and something outside of that has caused it to be cancelled. Questions, Councillor Wilson?
We're happy to move straight into some recommendations.
Oh, yeah.
If the chair wishes, but I see Councillor.
I'll just take, if there's any questions of the report first, and then we'll go to recommendations. Councillor Carter?
Question, if a person's making an application, and in the application it usually states what things are being funded for, and if their advertising has already been, they've got funding for the advertising, and that our contribution is for something else, can they then claim for the loss of funding for the advertising?
That would be up to the committee to make a decision on that, but when we take into account an application, they may have as part of the application advertising as part of their budget line, but we don't specifically generally state that we're only funding this portion and not advertising. When we support an event, we support an event or an initiative in its totality. So I don't think we can distinguish advertising spend out of what we're supporting.
If the application makes a distinction between what we're funding and what they've already got funded for, can it be switched over?
Yeah.
Argument's sake.
Potentially, I think you're going to start clouding the whole issue.
I'm getting in before that comes to light. That's all.
Yeah. It could cloud the issue on whether you make a decision on refunding an event or not. I think the rules around here, around the reasoning for them, or what constitutes a cancellation versus a postponement, clearly states that. I think we could go into some in-depth stuff and create more confusion actually by adding a whole lot of different things in. So, yeah, personally, I don't see any need to try and distinguish that out.
Kia ora, can I have an input into that, kōrero,
No.
please? Given that we ask, I agree that with the report that's come forward from Ash, thank you, and being able to distinguish what is being put in as cancelled and what is being put in as postponed. So I think that that's good. But I think that the question that's been raised by Councillor Carter is a valid one, given the way that given that we're actually asking what is it? What do you want the money for? So I mean, the way around it is that we just get rid of it if we want to get. Do you know what I mean? So that it doesn't make it hard, but just by saying that it could get cloudy. If in my mind we've made it cloudy, and any type of applications that I'm doing, they want to know, normally people want to know, what do you want the money for? So I agree with him on that thing, but if we want to go with what you've suggested, Nigel, and I'm happy for us to go that way if that's what we want to do, but then in my head we've got to remove some of those, to me you've got to remove some of those things that get put in there about what are your, because rightly so, some of those applications have said they only wanted specific things. We want to make the process as easy as possible in my head. I'm just responding to the kōrero and listening to what people are saying.
Thanks, Councillor Hero. That, in my mind, would be a requirement as part of a recommendation then, if you wanted to specifically say if something was excluded or included in the refund, that would be part of the recommendation. So if you look at recommendation 3, now remember these haven't been put yet, but part B says council funds that have already been spent prior to the cancellation will not need to be refunded. So if you wanted to make a specific thing around advertising or what you've applied for, then that recommendation could be added there. Councillor Wilson.
As I said before, I'd like to move to some recommendations.
Right. Sounds like a good idea.
One of the items one of the matters that's been discussed by the table, I believe, can be easily tidied up in one of the recommendations with some wording that I've already given some consideration to. I'd like to remove recommendation 2, both A and B, as I believe that they are clear in their objectives and they meet the intent of Finance and Performance Committee. So I'd like to move recommendation 2, both A and B.
Okay, a seconder for that, Councillor Panapa. Would you like to speak to your recommendation? No? Any speakers? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And you would like to continue?
I'd like to continue with your blessing. So there's the recommendations in 3 are could just do a little bit of tweaking, but I don't think a lot, but I think it would clarify the issue that was being discussed before. So first of all, if we look at recommendation 3A, I think it is important that we remove the words where practical at the end. It's very ambiguous as to what is where practical may in actual fact be. So I think the recommendation A could stand, will be required to refund this money back to council. I think where practical should be removed. It's open to a lot of subjecture as to what is practical and what is not practical. So I'd like to move that with those 2 words removed, but to come back to B, which I think comes back to tidying up the issue that other members have raised, council funds that have already been spent prior to cancellation will not need to be refunded. I think to clarify that, receipt of payment and expenses incurred will be required. Because you're saying that if it's already been spent, what was it spent on? So I think it would be normally prudent to request some sort of receipt or confirmation of payment that money has been spent, rather than just an acceptance that, well, we spent that money, well, that's okay, you don't need to give it back. Well, I think accepting the fact that some money may have been spent or incurred is fine. However, proof of expenditure, i.e. receipts, will be required. Proof of funding.
You're speaking to your recommendation, obviously, so we need a seconder to get that sitting on the table. You're happy to second that? Okay, thank you, Councillor Carter. So anything further you would like to add, or are you happy to?
I think I've said what I need to say there.
Okay, all right.
Are you happy with that wording? Sorry.
Are we talking A?
B.
B. Evidence was federal required from the recipient. Yes.
Okay, we'll take speakers to the recommendation or questions of it? Councillor Ash.
I was just wondering within that recommendation if there's provision to understand if any of those costs have been covered by other funding applications that they may have received from elsewhere. I don't know if that's a thing that's, if we need that, but just wondering if it's, say, for instance, we were using the example of advertising, say the advertising has actually been covered by another funding agency, because quite often, obviously, with events, there'll be applications into a number of different funders, and advertising may be covered elsewhere. So don't know whether or not that needs to be a provision within that. Just a question. Thank you.
Well, I guess if you wanted it as a provision, you would have to move it as an amendment to that that recommendation that currently sits on the table. So again, to me, that starts cloudying the issue, but
Sorry. Thank you very much. Hopefully, Councillor Duncan, you can hear me all right. Thank you. I don't disagree with the motions, but I would point out or suggest we reflect that we have skilled staff in this area. And if we dive too deeply into saying we want this, this and this is work they normally do anyway. These would be discussions that staff have with applicants subsequent to council decisions. So council decisions are more around intent rather than the mechanics of. I'm not sure that it's all necessary, but I don't disagree with it.
yeah, my understanding would be that these are rulings that council have endorsed, but staff will enact them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come back to us to make a decision whether it's refunded or not. We're endorsing these recommendations.
Absolutely.
Councillor Panapa.
The only thing I was going to add is that I think we can trust those who approve the grant in the first place would have the ability to have discretion in terms of the different gradients of requests. So rather than this table discussing how a funding application should be refunded, that body is more than capable to look at that and reassess. Is that a fair?
That would be staff that would handle that refund request. Yeah. Right, any other speakers? Otherwise I will put this to the vote. Okay. Now, recommendation 3, which has A and B there. All those in favour? Against? Right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving right along, we are on to item 9 on the agenda, and that is the financial snapshot. And taking us through this report, are we Mr. Toombs or?
No, myself, yeah.
Hilary.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I'll take the report largely as read. I might just talk to it if I can for a couple of seconds.
Yes.
So what we have here is December's results in the standard format. What we'll be presenting next month is what we call a mid-year budget review, where we look at these figures in more detail. So, for example, what we'll bring next month is in addition to this. What we have in front of us is the year-to-date recorded expenditure and year-to-date budgets. What we'll bring next month is, now we're 6-7 months through the year, is we'll add to these figures by adding in forecast spends and known future unbudgeted expenditure that we were talking about this morning, for example. So it'll be a bigger picture view next month. So we call it a mid-year budget review. So give us a bigger overview of where we are. Well, we've already started that process. We had a great meeting last week after these agenda papers were sent out. Hillary's instruction, myself and Peter and Arno and Jess met and went through the capital programme with Galen as well. Sorry, Galen. I went through each of the projects and worked out what we thought we'd finish this year, where we thought our budget has been carried forward but maybe won't be needed, where we've got shortfalls in capital budgets, and we'll do that same process with all the operating cost centres as well. Hillary's already sat down with every cost centre manager, I believe, to start looking at next year's budgets, and that's identified some areas where we might want to put more focus in looking at budgets for next year. We'll bring all that to next month's Finance and Performance Committee. But I might just highlight a couple of things that our review on the capital programme identified. I've referred to one of them on page 22 of the agenda papers. Low cost, low risk programme. Looks like it won't be fully spent this financial year, which isn't a big deal. It just means more of it gets rolled over next year. Just for committee's members' information, it's a 3-year programme with a 10.5 mil capital budget spread over the 3 years. We had half of that in this year's budget due to weather conditions, etc. We think we'll be less than that. So there's a timing thing, but it also means our income will be lower because that's far funded. So that's referred to at the bottom of page 22. But more importantly, maybe, it's on page 25. There's 2 budget lines there, which are actually for the same thing. Under libraries, we have a $1.97 million budget for new Martin admin and library building construction. What that was a budget line in last year's budget that was carried forward. I think back in April, May, we identified that we wouldn't spend it, so it was put into the big carry forward bucket. And as we went through looking at the long-term plan budgets, a more detailed budget picture was developed for that was actually referred to in the PMO report this morning. So that 500k there for Martin Building Design and Construction is part of a 4-year budget programme, which basically supersedes the one beneath it. So what I'd be looking for is some sort of recommendation, if I may, or I might get the process about this wrong, just asking the Finance Committee to recommend to Council that final budget line there just gets removed from the budget, 1.97. And I've drafted something there on the screen. I apologise for those on Zoom, you won't be able to see this. But what I'm asking is that the Finance Performance Committee recommend to Council the removal of the 1.97 million new Martin admin and library construction 21-22 capital budget, noting that a separate capital budget, Martin Building and Construction, based on more current figures, also exists and is for the same project. Happy for that to be tinkered with, but I think you will get the gist of where I'm going with that.
Okay.
So, sorry for my brief introduction.
No, thank you. Well, we'll start off with the reception of this report. So if I could have a mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Hira, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, we'll get through to that recommendation shortly. I think we'll just ask for questions of the report first, and then as we work our way through, we'll move on to getting that recommendation put, if we have a mover and seconder for that. So, first of all, I'll start off with questions of the report. Councillor Wilson.
One for me, and Dave, you mentioned that you're going to bring a 6-month review to next month's finance and performance. Is that correct?
A mid-year budget review.
Mid-year budget review.
Based on January figures for 7 months, yeah.
And when we look through these figures, we increasingly see timing differences and variances. Is there any way that we can, because when you first look at the report, you see these big anomalies and variances in the report, and then later down you go, well, it's a timing difference because we've yet to receive some money from Waka Kotahi, or our rates income hasn't been allocated, or this funding hasn't come in through whatever the source it is. So when you initially look at it, you go, what's going on here? Is next month when you bring that 6-month review to catch up on that, or is there some way that those big variances, which always seem to be there, can be smoothed out within the budget lines? I'm not quite sure.
There's 3 comments I'll make on that. The best way of looking at all of this stuff is when you don't have a year-to-date column, you actually have a full-year forecast column. Then all timing differences just evaporate.
Right.
So over the coming months, we'll be working towards having that in there. So cost centre managers, we're in the middle of rolling out a whole new budget consciousness initiative through Council. So cost centre managers have got a much greater awareness now of their budgets, they're understanding them, and they're going to be asked in the coming months to start doing full-year forecasts. So that gets rid of all timing differences. Until we get there, there's 2 different types of timing differences, where the budget's been, for example, evenly spread over 12 months, and the costs come in May, June. So that's a budgeting thing that, again, awareness will make us smarter about how we phase the budgets. And the other timing difference is where you get contractors. Typically contractors, they do monthly work for us, but they don't invoice us for 2 months.
So therefore, that would tidy up the little issue that I spoke about with Arno and the project team before about the Hereford type question. That would alleviate those sorts of anomalies sitting on the budget lines.
If you look at year-to-date figures and a contractor doesn't give us an invoice for 2 or 3 months, the only way of getting that in here is if we start tracking every single one of these and putting in a manual accrual each time they haven't invoiced us. So if you just focus on the full year picture, it gets rid of all of that stuff.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a comment on that. I have to give Dave a lot of credit in this space because in the past, the budgets were kind of managed by all of us independently. This time round, it's much more structured and discussed quite a lot. So what will happen, I think, going forwards is we'll have such a firm grasp on what is needed for carryover and what is not. And I would imagine it's something we will then present to council towards the end of the year to say we are close to the end of the year. These are all the issues with all these budgets and these are the ones that needs to be carried over, but it'll be firm and everybody will understand it. So at the moment, we discuss it with the finance team quite a lot to determine where we are on all of these projects. And if there's some weird anomaly, at least now we all know about it, which I think is a huge improvement from previously. And if we can then get that message across to councillors in a succinct way, I think it'll have a lot of value. So we all know what's going on.
Your Worship.
Excuse me. Thank you very much for that. What concerns me is whether we're doing this reforecasting on historic budgets or whether they're actually factoring in real-time position and to, for instance, if we look at a loading of, say, 30% on capital projects, which is probably a minimum, are they being factored in with this review process?
The mid-year review in its initially was focused on the 21-22 budgets. So yes, officers will be looking at whether CPI, for want of a better word, will impact their ability to deliver the services on them budgets. I think the bigger issue is where CPI is going to increase the big capital projects over the next 4 or 5 years, where we might have something in for even 3 years, 2 years. We might have a $5 million project that's now going to cost 7. That's part of the annual plan considerations as to whether that's...
Yeah, but what I'd also like to see is some separation from an annual plan process to works that are currently being looked at, being contracted or progressed.
Within this financial year?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went through that capital programme last week with Arno and Galen and Jess.
Yeah, so some updates on that in terms of projections is important because, for instance, if we go and approve a business case for, say, doing a grandstand in Taihape, and we base it on historical estimates and so on, that's going to be a long way removed from where we are currently in the world. You know, we've had a project come in this morning saying our historic budget 1.5 million, and now the possibility of it being a $5 million project. You multiply that out by our capital works program of 20 plus million a year. We're talking very, very substantial figures.
Yeah.
I just don't want us to just go down the line of a commitment without absolutely understanding financially where we're going to be.
May I?
Yes, yeah, you can respond.
Yes, again, the mid-year budget review will look at that specifically for this year's projects. The annual planning will look at it for year 2 and 3 of the long-term plan. All the capital projects will be reviewed to see what's in the long-term plan. Is that still a realistic budget? And that dovetails into the CEO's report this morning. One of the things we're looking at.
The last part of this matrix, if you like, is, you know, if we exit the Three Waters business, you know, where does that then leave us with regards to individual projects and our ability to fund?
If I may, where it leaves us with individual projects, we can only go on the best information at the time, of course, which we, as Mr. Foster mentioned this morning, current understanding is that these projects will be taken over by the entity B. As to what degree of influence we'll have over them up to conjecture. Financially, each audit and risk committee paper is now going to be receiving a summary on the potential financial impacts of the three waters on council. That'll be going to the March audit and risk committee.
Okay. Sorry, can I just make one last comment on that? I think also that'll be rolled up in the next LTP process, which I think is going to be super challenging for all of us to figure out if the three waters shift out of our business, what does the next 3 years look like in that LTP process? I think that will be quite a challenge, I think.
I hope we've got to get head around that a lot earlier than that, certainly within the next 6 months heading forward, because that's going to have as at July 24 or whatever it is, that's when the rubber hits the road, and we want to be well ahead of the game. Yeah. Further questions? Councillor Dalgety, you had your hand up on Zoom.
I think that we've a formula has just been dropped out of some of those reports, just on the grand total on page 18, 19, 20 and 23. Under the variances isn't included in there.
Okay, can I comment on that? Yes, so basically, councillor, where you have a year-to-date variance, can you hear me? Yeah, where you have a year-to-date variance, it's a positive number, and the budget's in brackets, you get a percentage that's in the millions. So we decided, rather than give you a percentage that's in the millions, we'll just take the percentage out, because you're trying to get a percentage difference between a positive number and a negative number. The year-to-date percentage variance is just meaningless. Actually, not meaningless, misleading.
Okay, thank you. I think.
I've got a question on page 16 of the financial snapshot, the whole of council activity performance. Under the personnel costs, we've got a variance there of 244,000, and we had a significant change of budget leading into this LTP period to include extra positions. So the budget went up for personnel cost quite substantially. And reading this, you're seeing a creep above those increased budgets. So to me, that raised a question: what's creating that increase in variance there?
The main reason, and I'm trying to remember what area it was, there's a particular area that was given a grant and a budget put on to do a whole chunk of work. Yeah. And part of that was get contractors on to go and do some stuff. So that was all an other expense budget. And we decided it was more efficient and effective to actually put staff on to do that. So the budget for that particular programme is in other expenses, but the cost is showing in personnel expenses.
So yeah, under community wellbeing on page 20, there's a personnel cost there. It's gone up 102%, but that's 90,000 of it. But
yeah, we'll check that out and get back to you.
Yeah, I'd just like a clearer understanding, because if we've increased the budget line to take on extra staff, and yet, we've got a creep of that level over and above. I understand where, there's a cost centre to a personnel for a specific project, and if that can be identified and provided, that's fine. But when you're seeing creep of that starting to head up, I think we need to provide some sort of explanation behind it. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Just a further question from me, Chair. Thank you. On page 10, I've been looking at this and I can't quite figure it out, but feel free to call me thick if I've got this wrong. But for the period, capital expenditures. So if we go down and we look under community and leisure assets, we've got Taipi Memorial Park, Taipi Grandstand, Taipi Amenities Design, which clearly tells me that there's 3 projects up there. But as far as I'm aware, there's only 2 projects up there. And one of the projects which we heard earlier today is already under construction and has started, has no costing units to it. So what is Taipi Memorial Park? And we know what the grandstand is, we know what the amenity, but what is Taipi Memorial Park with a effectively amended budget of $1.8 million? It looks as though something's not quite right there. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Before I get into that, just to confirm, the page 10 councillor's referring to is a hard-coded number on the actual page. It's page 25 of the agenda papers.
Sorry, yeah, 25, yeah, two numbers on the pages, yes, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's that business units, community and leisure domains, those particular fee figures would indicate that there's 3 separate projects.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking to see if I
I know the answer. That was a carryover from last year. So the carryover from last year and the budget for this year have different names, but it's for the same thing. So we had, let's say we had 2.2 or something in the budget last year.
Yeah.
There was some left over after all the investigations and blah, blah, blah. And then we added another 1.7 in this year's budget. So those two together go for the amenities building.
Yes, but we've started the amenities building, but we haven't spent any money on it, according to this information. Yeah, we have incurred costs in there, as we saw in a previous in our previous council papers.
Yeah, that's the difference on the previous year's budget. So let's say it was 2.2, I think it was 2.2 or 2.3 was approved. We spent money on consultants and design, blah, blah, blah. And there was 1.821 carried over into this budget.
All encompassed under one code as Memorial Park.
No, that was for the amenities building. So that one there, 60.1 was in last year's budget for the amenities building.
Yes.
And underneath the type amenities, detailed design and construction is in this year's budget, this annual plan.
Yes.
But the two of them are for the same thing. The one is just carried over from last year and the one is in this year. So it adds up to just over 3.
Yeah, just wondering why the two budget lines are in there then. It seems a little bit confusing to me why we would have the 2 budget lines in there for the one project.
Yeah, the one was just named something different. That's the same.
Can that be changed? Can that be reported differently so that it does make sense with someone reading the report? Because I can see your confusion.
It looks like there's 3 different projects up there.
Yeah,
There's only 2, and the
yeah.
2, as I stated this morning in the council meeting, are 2 very, very different projects.
Yeah.
And should be treated as such.
If I may, my gut feeling is that wasn't a conscious decision to keep them separate. It was just different arms doing different things. So.
Okay. So that can be amended to read better. Okay.
Do you have a preference for which labelling you'd like, Memorial Park or amenities?
Well, I think that, if I may, Chair, we have always discussed 2 separate projects. One being the grandstand, one being the Taibi Amenities Design, Build and Construction. Those are the 2 projects. They just happen to be on Taibi Memorial Park, but they are 2 separate things, and I think they should be, the costings for each need to go into the different slots, specifically for those 2 projects.
All right, yeah, we're happy with that. Yeah, altering that, make an alteration.
I'm saying yes, Ellie will do it, yeah.
Any further questions online?
Can I just ask, from a practical point of view, are you talking about an aggregation of lines? Is that what you're wanting?
Yes. Well, either
The 2 sums go together.
Either delete one or take one out, but I can't understand why there's 3 different cost lines for 2 projects.
Well, I can understand why it's arisen, and I can understand some reasons for wanting to keep them separate in terms of audit.
I think for me, it's simply changing the name to reflect what it is. One's a carry forward and one's this year's budget.
Yeah.
And I think, Hillary, it can be easy.
To the same project.
Same project.
Yes, yeah.
What one refers to a carry forward from last year, one's related to this year. They both need to be itemised differently. So you get, because if you don't, you get the same argument. Why is it 3 million?
Yeah.
So it needs to be on 2 separate lines. I do accept that we can name the cell so the question doesn't exist. It's clear from the wording.
But in terms of councillors wanting to keep a track of this, you could have 2 separate lines and then a heavy aggregated total, which is the addition of those 2 subsets. So as a governor, you can keep an eye on the total project cost for this. But I just want to make sure that you weren't asking staff to just aggregate the 2 into one account.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the accounting process. The reporting process through the PMO could report them as an aggregated total. Yeah.
Well, can I,
yes.
just expanding on your point, I think, Mayor, you said that you see the total project costs, not, the accounting system will just show you the financial year cost. It's the PMO that shows you whole of life,
Yeah. Further questions? Okay, we'll move back to the recommendation that has been suggested, and that's in regards with that set of figures we were just looking at. And Mr. Toombs has given us explanation around the budget line that was sitting in there as a carry forward from the 2021 into this 21-22 capital budget, which is not going to be expended. And we have another line sitting there under Martin Building Design and Construction, which is where the budget is getting expended from. So the recommendation as it reads is about removing that figure out of the reporting. If that recommendation is put as listed, does it have any implication financially anywhere of any concern?
No, what it'll mean is them pages that reflect the capital budgets, page 25 and 26, was it?
Yeah.
That line won't reappear in future months, and the figure of 49.6 million for total current year capital budget will come down by 2 mil.
Yeah. So the ultimate reason for removing it there is so that it doesn't falsely mislead that we're not expending our proposed capital expenditure to the extent that we knew we weren't going to anyway. Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to move the recommendation there as written from the chair. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Wilson. And I'll speak to it. Pretty much Mr. Toombs has provided the information about the reasonings for removing it. That was a carry forward from, with the expectation that we were going to be further down the track with the Martin Civic Centre or admin and library construction. That's certainly still a long way off, and there's a budget line there that we're expending going through the business case, better business case model, and as such there's no need to have that budget line sitting there in our financial records. Any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put it straight to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. Okay, that's the financial snapshot report. We'll move on to item 9.2, the QV monthly report. It's page 27 on the order paper. Again, this is for November of last year. And it's certainly showing still that the district is trucking along at a reasonable pace as far as consenting goes and as far as house price values go, as indicated in the report. We've had an increase on the average house price in the district of 31.2% compared to 12 months ago, which is fairly significant. It's perhaps the continued model that this district's catching up, having a fairly large catch up from a period of low values of properties. I'm happy to take any questions, unless there's, Mr. Toombs, were you wanting to have any comment on the report?
No.
No? Okay. Questions of the report, Your Worship?
Not so much a question. What I think I am seeing in the marketplace at the moment is a flattening of price increases. So we're possibly just seeing a sort of a plateau being reached at the moment. So,
yeah, it's certainly been I guess the government regulations of loan to equity ratios of home lending has had an impact across the country, and we are seeing a bit of that flattening. But yeah, the demand certainly still seems to be demand out there. Councillor Carter.
Page 31, explanation for lack of numbers on there.
I would be presuming that's to do with someone wanting to object to their valuation and or valuation on property or maintenance, and they've had none. And that would be we've had this zero report before. Usually you'll see numbers in there when new valuations come out. So when the district's been revalued, there'll be a whole lot of objections and what have you taking place. Yeah. I think you'll find that's for the period of November only, that's all, yeah.
Just as a side interest, I was asked to have a look at one owner asked me to go and have a look at his property and meet with him. He had gone through the QV revaluation as everybody did. He went through the first stage of an objection and then sort of lost track of what he was meant to do when. So subsequent to property near Taihape, it was property that was probably not in great shape. And I went to Simon Wilcox, who heads QV, and asked if there was something that he could have a look at. And his response was brilliant. He said, look, Andy, flat out in the middle of the Hawke's Bay revaluation at the moment, but it's, you know, you've never asked previously. I'll go and look at it personally. I received a letter yesterday to say that he, during the Christmas break, had gone to that property, revalued it. There will be a valuation change, which will result in a lower rate take from both ourselves and Horizons. And for that individual, probably makes his debt position manageable. So it was nice that, you know, that Simon had gone out of his way, because he's not absolutely required to do that. So I thought, hats off to QV.
Yeah, I know there's certainly, thanks Ben, there's certainly open to people objecting at any stage. I mean, it's not just on the revaluation of the district. So if they believe that their rating value of, or rateable value of their property is certainly outside of scope. Councillor Gordon.
My question through you, Chair. Andy, how much of an outlier was that property? I mean, is this a property that needs a coat of paint, or it's in serious disrepair and
Reasonably serious disrepair.
so it's a real outlier then?
I can't give any more
Yeah,
details.
that's fine. Mutton dressed up as lamb.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. This might not be the time to ask this question, except it's been put up. Can someone just clarify, are you able to challenge those QV valuations at any time? Because I understand that, in fact, you have a time period to do.
Sorry, I might have had a slip of tongue there. And Councillor Dalgetty is well versed in these. So, Councillor Dalgetty, perhaps you could provide an answer.
Yes, there is a time frame for those objections. When you take out a building consent, there's a revaluation related to that building consent between the 3-yearly revaluation. So you will again get a chance to object to that revaluation at that time. Does that explain it? So you can't just nilly-nilly think, okay, I'm not happy with my valuation. Yeah. You have to object during the time, and unfortunately that's often over the Christmas January period. And then, but if you had some other work, did a subdivision or had a building consent, you could object to that revaluation in between the triennial.
Thank you for that clarity, Councillor. Further questions of the report? If not, could I have someone move that that report be received? His Worship's moving, seconded by Councillor Carter. All those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. Right, moving on to 9.3, the Treasury and Debt Report. Mr. Toombs, are you
Yeah, just briefly, this Treasury and debt report used to be included in the budget report, but now we've got Danny and Hilary both on board. Hilary's got responsibility for the budgets and Danny looks after Treasury, so we split this report out into a separate one. The 3 or 4 bullet points you've got there under item section 2, they're very similar to what used to be included in the monthly report at the end of the budget report.
Thank you. Okay, well, any questions? It's a fairly straightforward explanatory report there of the debt position and treasury position of council. Questions on Zoom? No, questions around the table? No, so there's indication there around the predicted capital expenditure, and I guess when we have some input and discussion around the annual plan, then we'll have a better and clearer indication of the sort of debt levels we will be getting to towards the end of this financial year. All right, could I have someone move that this report be received? Thank you, Councillor Gordon, seconded by Councillor Carter. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 9.4 on the order paper, happy or not report. And Ms Gordon.
I probably haven't got a lot to say. Their reports as it is. I'm happy if they're happy or not. If there's any questions, like we said, like I did say in the report, there is a reduced number, but that will be because of the number of close downs over the Christmas period. So yes, but happy to take any questions if they're not difficult.
Right. Well, we have to take them difficult or not, I guess, whether you can answer them.
Hopefully not difficult, but just stands out to me. What happened on the 28th of the 12th? And I've looked through the report a couple of times and I can't actually see where whatever happened and why. You have a look on the 28th of the 12th, there is a responses, it says something like 40% of whatever the responses were on that day were not very happy. But I can't see from the report what indicates that. It's page 35, I believe.
Oh, up the top.
Is it 30? Yeah, 35.
I can certainly have a look into this unless Galen's got any insight into this, because our main office here wasn't open, so there would not.
That's what I thought. A lot of our places weren't open that period of time.
Libraries and information centres, they're only closed Christmas Day.
So,
Galen, was there any incidents over that time that you're aware of?
Not aware. I'll have to follow it up.
Yeah, we can have a look at that. Maybe just send you an email about what.
yeah, just look at it. It was just
was an incident.
looks like a significant jump there to be.
Maybe at Tamar Petey, something else.
Well, but then again, there's what I was looking at was just looking to see, was it another similar event to what we had up in Taipu? We just had somebody randomly hitting the button. If that's what it gets determined to be, well, we can deal with it. But if there was something that actually did happen on that, I think we should know about that equally as well. So.
There's a timing period for people pushing the button too. It does block them for quite a few seconds, so they can't do that. But Galen and I'll have a look at that. It will be one of those sites that were open over Christmas.
Okay. Well, if you can provide some comment back to. Back to.
There's no red faces.
No.
There's no.
No. So it might be an anomaly, but let's find out some information and feedback. Your Worship.
Yeah, summer is time historically where we've run into complaints around water quality. I mean, it's fine having this buttons that you push, but if historically one of our biggest concerns is the provision of clear, suitable drinking water, for example, can you give us any feedback? I haven't heard a lot out in the community. And I'm presuming that all is fine, but who is tracking those sorts of questions? Because, I mean, this is fine, but it doesn't actually deal with what is the principal concern?
I can reply to that,
Oh, no.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. First of all, the first part of the question is request for services, where we pick that up. So people phone in to complain about odour and taste, and that's where we pick up those complaints. Normally, January, February is really heavy.
Yeah.
I was hoping people would notice we've put in a huge amount of work with the treatment team this year to improve. And I think the water quality through January this year, even though it has been hot and dry, has been pretty good, actually, to date. I didn't want to say anything because the way Murphy's Law works is that by tomorrow the water will be back to its normal old tricks, but we've planned really well and we've put in a lot of effort, and that's also partly why that bore was on. So just between Christmas and New Year's, we got a bit of a scare with the dams turning over, and we decided to use that as a dilution of the water. But yeah, the water quality this year is better, and I can go and have a look on the request for service to see how many complaints we've had, but I think it'll be very few this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's my perception as well. But that's why I really want to make sure that we get this sort of information, and it's not just a report each month around who's been pushing a button.
Yeah, just remember that we do that through our statement of service performance report to you. We're due to give you the 6-month one at next month's meeting, which will cover all those. The water, roading, all the rest of it, like our normal statement of service performance. This is just our happy or not tool that we undertook to feedback to finance. The other one is the big comprehensive report, and it's being done in a dashboard way so that you can see at a glance where the issues are, how many requests have been received, how many have been dealt with, how many are still open, all that sort of stuff will come to you next month.
So there would be headlines around specific performances of council, such as water quality,
Right.
roading is another one.
It's all the measures that are in that long-term plan.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing a spike of information and requests come in, do you advise us that, without waiting for 2 or 3 month period, for instance, if we were receiving 50 or 60 comments a day through social media or other outlets around poor water quality, that would be
Be a trigger.
Yeah.
Yep, and we're not seeing that.
Yeah.
At all. Yeah, I've just looked at the request for service. We're not seeing that at all either.
When you say that would be a trigger, that's a trigger not to just investigate it, but obviously but to put comms and to provide to this committee. I mean, it is a performance, finance and performance. If you specifically saw something that was of concern, would you report it through this process?
I'd probably email councillors like we've done in the past.
Yes.
We put out that we've got water quality issues in Martin and this is how we're dealing with it, and we copy you into that.
I'd love to just add on to that. So if you could cast your mind back to last year, January, and even the year before, the moment we know that there's challenges with odour and taste, we would inform you before the complaints come in, so at least you're aware.
Thank you, because I think it's being managed incredibly well. And I think that the pumping and diluting that you're doing as part of that process. So.
Yeah. It's a big improvement this year, so I'm happy.
So,
well done.
Following on from that, the fix-it process, now that's changed for this year. Is that up and that's fully operational now?
Yes,
the new process and the 360-degree sort of feedback that whoever instigates the issue gets feedback information as well.
It's still a work in progress. The RFS acknowledgement and feedback process is almost complete. We're waiting for a last tweak in our system from Magic, who are our suppliers, to get that finished. The QR codes and things at sports grounds, there's a slight delay on that. Leah is actually on leave, and I'm happy to talk about why after the meeting. So there's a slight delay in that process, but it is still top of our radar, top of our priority.
Okay. Because that was one of the key tools that was going to change a lot of the concerns where people lost a bit of faith in the fix-it process through lack of, I guess, feedback back to them once they'd made that laid that initial concern. Okay. Any further questions?
Just quickly for me, but as an end user at 2 or 3 different locations in the town, my water's fine. So thank you. It's been great. 3 different locations and it's good.
Questions on Zoom? Any further questions of this report on Zoom? No? Okay. Well, perhaps one of you may be happy to move the reception of the report. So first hand up. Okay, we've got Councillor Duncan and Councillor Hiroa. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of this meeting. So thank you all for your attendance and input, and thank you to all those online watching the meeting, and to the councillors who have attended by Zoom. Wish you well.